Welcome to the very first Brunch show. I'm Matthew McGee, and in this coming episode, we'll be talking to people in our community about issues that we might be talking about with our friends while enjoying brunch. Lifestyles, the arts, health, politics, family, and much more. We'll be coming to you with a new episode once a month over the next year, and each episode will be different. Different topics, guests, and some surprises. Project PRIDE SRQ wants to thank the Sarasota Community Foundation for a generous grant that provided the funds to launch this show. We're very grateful. And also, a special thank you to the Harvest Church for allowing us to shoot our very first episode here at their church. We'll learn more about these two organizations throughout the show. We're in the middle of the holiday season, and we're in the midst of the worst pandemic the world has seen in over a century. This show launches right in the middle of Hanukkah, and Christmas and New Year's are right around the corner. We hope you got through Thanksgiving safely and in a way that you could enjoy the company of those you care about. We've taken precautions on the Brunch show to follow CDC guidelines in order to safely produce this show. Every person who is involved with this program, including our guests, have taken a COVID test within 24 hours of entering our studio. We're doing temperature checks. All our crew are wearing masks and maintaining recommended distances. Here on our set, guests' chairs are several feet apart. Fans are running, and our guests have been given the opportunity to talk with us remotely or wear a mask if they choose. Our guests are escorted in and out of the building to minimize the amount of time they are here with us. We are doing what we can to ensure the safety of everyone involved with our program. Today, we're talking to some knowledgeable people about how to safely navigate the holidays, being mindful of our physical and mental health. Later in the show, we have a couple of fun segments. Brian Kraft is going to introduce us to our Bartender of the Month, and we'll learn a little holiday mixology. And at the end of the show, a live segment featuring Brian with Spin to Win. More on that later. You'll want to stay with us. But first, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tanya Schreibman, who is the medical director at Can Community Health here in Sarasota. Dr. Schreibman is a board-certified infectious disease specialist with a subspecialty in HIV and hepatitis. Where are we in mid-December 2020 with managing the spread of COVID?
So we just surpassed 1 million cases in Florida. So, when we're looking at this at a local level, at a regional level, at a state level, as well as at a national level, we're seeing very high surges everywhere. And I think what's distinct now is, early on in the pandemic in March and April, we were seeing high case counts clustered in the Northeast, in Massachusetts, in New York, in New Jersey. And that was followed by July. We saw high cases, as we all remember, here in Florida. We passed 15,000 in a single day. And the whole Sunbelt region saw a very high surge. And now virtually every county, every state has been affected. And I think that's the big difference in our current surge. And the lack of guidance in terms of mask mandates and social distancing, I think has likely only fueled that surge, in addition to holidays and travel and colder temperatures coming our way, raise the concern for continued exponential growth.
Let's talk about people with HIV and the additional risks.
Okay. So with regard to HIV, there's nothing per se that would put someone at increased risk for COVID-19, assuming they're taking their medications and their viral loads are controlled and their immune systems are thus bolstered and high. That's distinct from someone with more advanced or end-stage AIDS. I think the reason this issue is often brought up is when you look at the comorbidities or the medical conditions that put someone at increased risk for COVID-19, we've heard them over and over: cardiovascular disease, lung disease, obesity, and people that are immunocompromised are on that list. And so many people ask me about HIV, but in reality, their immune systems are being bolstered by their medications. And in fact, many have asked me if they're protected because they're on antivirals, and that has not borne out either. But the bottom line is we're all at risk, but there's nothing per se about HIV that puts someone at increased risk.
Now, you were talking earlier about the holidays and people wanting to do things, travel and see family, friends. What do you recommend at this time? Do you think that's smart, or do you have any other options for people? What do you think about that?
So probably not the answer that everyone wants to hear, but I concur with Dr. Tony Fauci and with the CDC guidelines. I don't think it's safe this year. I feel I've always seen my family in the Northeast and always had large gatherings, but I think this year we need to be grateful that we did it last year and the year before, but in order to be healthy and have our friends and family healthy to do it in 2021, I think it's best to be safe this year.
Especially here, in Sarasota, that many people like to have, their big annual holiday party. Those are probably pretty out of the question too, right? Is that correct, Doctor?
I think we just canceled all of ours across the board for all of our clinics. I don't think there's any way to have a gathering, a party,
Right.
which as soon as you say for the word party, you're already at more than 6 people, which goes against, already puts us in a risky situation. It usually involves eating, which again, then you lose your masks, and it involves drinking and guards are down. And I don't think it's safe, sadly, this year.
Is there a safe way for people to gather?
I think there is. I know this year that, again, we didn't get together. I can't remember not having 15 to 20 people under my roof for Thanksgiving, but this year we had a Zoom family reunion, and my kids cooked with their grandparents for Thanksgiving, and then we did a Zoom family dinner. So I think there are ways to do it. It's not ideal. I know when I hated FaceTime, and I didn't even know what Zoom was. And when we first started telehealth with patients, I was very averse to it. The whole thing kind of made me uncomfortable, but I think it can work. And I think now it can actually be an intimate experience. And at a time that's otherwise quite lonely, I think it can provide people with that comfort. So not ideal, but I think there are ways around it to be virtual and to be safe.
What about social bubbles or pods? I know that sounds like something out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but what about small groups of people who all kind of keep an eye on each other and stay within their groups? Is that safe, or is there always still a risk? I feel like there is, but it's best to hear from a doctor about something like that.
I think, and early on, that was a great concept, and these things have just kept changing. And in theory, it's a perfect concept. And the idea behind it is, you have your small group of friends or family, and that all are similar, and they're safe in their, with regard to safety, and they're what they think is being cautious. But I think the reality is it's really hard to do that. If I, for example, were to create a pod with a friend of mine or a couple of friends, but I still go to work and I see 15 patients, and those 15 patients see all their friends, I'm theoretically exposed to hundreds, at least, of people per day, and so are they. And then if we get together, unknowingly, we could be exposing each other, which is that whole concept of asymptomatic transmission. So I don't think it's ideal, except maybe in the setting of young kids, or even in like the college dorm setting, perhaps.
Right.
But overall, I think it's nicer in theory than it is in practice.
You brought up Dr. Fauci earlier, and I saw a very funny interview with him where someone said, with the vaccine, will the gays be able to brunch again? And he said, absolutely, and I'll join you, which I thought was a lot of fun. So I know even on our show, we're looking forward to being able to have brunch together again. That's sort of the whole idea of the show. Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us. You were terrific. And we're going to take a quick pause right now. And when we come back, Pastor Dan Miner of Harvest Sarasota Church and therapist Heather Eslien will join me to talk about the emotional and spiritual issues we face with ourselves and family during the holidays. We'll be right back. Our conversation continues with Pastor Dan Miner of the Harvest Church and Harvest House and gender therapist Heather Eslien. Heather has a private practice and specializes in working with trans people. And we're talking about coping with the COVID pandemic during the holidays. Dealing with either is extremely difficult, but both at the same time, it's more than some want to handle. Well, let's start by talking about holidays and navigating family. Now, listen, I just dealt with this. It was a bit crazy. My family feels like, COVID schmovid. So how should a person handle pressure from family to come home for a holiday?
Well, I think that they have to prepare themselves both emotionally and spiritually going into those meetings or those family times together, because people kind of need to recenter on who they are and what their faith is.
Absolutely.
And so when they're getting ready to go, I think people need to take some time out to realize that if their family is a family of faith, or if their family believes this or that about COVID, that they have to decide who they are, what they believe, and why they believe it, and be solid in that, and understand that the opinions of people that probably at times haven't had clear or concise opinions about them in the past are just transferring to something new. And in this case, it's the validity of COVID, or the validity of how risky or dangerous it is. And so it's really about grounding ourselves. And so I think people look at all the extra time we have to think as a bad thing, because suicides are up, and depression is up, and drinking is at an all-time high, and just trying to find ways to fill that time. But we can look at it differently and realize that we also have a lot of time to kind of self-reflect and really fuel ourselves up from a spiritual, emotional perspective, so that we can endure some maybe awkward conversations.
Sure. Now, as a pastor, I mean, we're entering, it's Hanukkah, we're entering into Christmas. Let me ask you this. Is it okay for us not to celebrate this year?
Oh, absolutely. People think that faith oftentimes is about finding the missing piece. And if you don't do this, or you don't do that, or you don't do this, you're going to somehow be incomplete. And I believe that faith is actually about discovering who you are and what you already have. I compare it to the Wizard of Oz. They were on this trek to get something they thought they were missing, only to find out in the end they always had it the entire journey.
Oh, sure. Listen, I know from The Wizard of Oz, believe me. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be a Dorothy. I turned out to be a cowardly lion, so who knows what happens there. Now, Heather, for you as a gender therapist, he's talking about how important it is for a person to be who they are. I know you understand this very well. What are the different kinds of stress that a person who's trans can feel about going home during the holidays? Even in the best of times, it's hard. During COVID, it makes it even more difficult, I think.
It really does complicate things quite a bit for the reasons that Dan mentioned, but also I think when you're LGBTQ, and in particular we're talking about the trans population, there's just there's so much isolation and loneliness that has been going on for the community that is much more exacerbated by the pandemic. So there's this need, there's this desire to be with family, to have some normalcy, of course. But then if your family is, if there's complicated family dynamics, let's just say, about perhaps around the person's identity, some of my clients are saying, I'm going to forgive myself, I'm going to set some boundaries, do the right thing for me, and I'm not going to go this year in person for perhaps reasons you suggested. People aren't doing the same strategy when it comes to social distancing and masking, but also just because we've had this incredibly difficult political election, and the fallout is still here. And so I think to avoid any excess stress, they think, I'm just going to do a Zoom chat with my family this year or something. It's a choice. You have to get grounded in what your belief system is, and then honor yourself in that.
Yeah, it's so true. A lot of people have formed social bubbles because of this, and so they keep close to a small group of people. Do you think this works?
I think it can work. You have to have a lot of trust with those small group of people. I know for me, I have to be very, very careful. I have a lowered immunity myself, and I am choosing to see clients just a very small portion in person. Most of them are all, via online or Zoom. When I do that, I am very careful and cautious and really weigh the odds of that. But I also know the people I see are also people who believe the same I do. They're social distancing. They're not going out much. I have one friend that we see on occasion, and I invited her to Thanksgiving, and I just know we've all been tested. I mean, you have to have that pact of trust. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes I see the community going off in spaces where there is no masking going on, there's no social distancing, and I know the desire is there to socialize. It's so strong and it's so needed, because of the isolation, but it's such a risk right now. And it's really about, I think, it's not about the person, it's about how am I going to be compassionate to the next person? How am I going to make sure that they're taken care of? So it's a really big deal right now.
This is a question for both of you, and I'll go to Pastor Dan first and then, of course, to you. But What do you think the long-term effects of this pandemic will be? I know we tend to not think about what post-COVID life will be like because it feels like it's been going on forever. But what do you think? What do you think there will be long-lasting after this is all over?
Well, I think people are actually finding some truths about themselves and their families and their world or their nation or the political environment. It feels like it's almost like when you heat up gold and all the dross comes to the top. We're really kind of figuring out what is valuable and what is kind of trash.
Right.
And what needs to be skimmed out of our lives and what needs to remain. And I think there's so many long-term effects that we can spin as negative or difficult to deal with or overcome, whether it's economic or isolation or loneliness or all of these things. But it also there's this idea, I know even in my own life, where you kind of figure out, like you said, who can you have a pact of trust with? Who wants to make this about themselves? Who's willing to really love somebody by sacrificing maybe their own perspective or their own desire to not do this or not do that? Or I mean, that's really becoming more and more evident. And so we might be experiencing some change in relationships, and that might continue. But at the same time, maybe it's that idea of getting rid of some of the things in our life that are toxic or have become negative or pulled us down. And really what's left, hopefully, are the relationships and the people and the things around us that actually add to our lives.
Yes. What do you think, Heather?
Well, I would agree with Pastor Dan, but I would also say, like, from a mental health standpoint, my fears are seeing more PTSD, more exacerbated anxiety and depression. It's sort of like, it's a pressure cooker, so any small amount of that is going to be magnified greatly with this pandemic, and the longer it goes on, the harder that gets. And so I worry about the ripple effect of this. I mean, I know it's coming. It's when you come out of a stressful situation, and I would say a traumatic situation, because again, there's so many layers of loss we're dealing with. I mean, even if people haven't lost loved ones to death, which is the most extreme, there's all these other many, many, many losses, some that we don't even recognize and won't until we're on the other side of it. And so when you're grieving, there's just so much. It's such a process, and it's not a straight road. It's a windy, curvy, one step forward, two step back kind of thing. So I really think this is going to, unfortunately, be problematic for the mental health community, but I also think that there can be some positivity because there's such a great need for good mental health care in this country, and we don't have it. We don't have enough of it. We don't have enough leadership around it. And because it's on par with the pandemic, I mean, the physical problems and the mental health problems go hand in hand, that I think finally maybe that will add to some, revelations that we need to pay attention to this.
Absolutely. There's so many great organizations, too, that are out there helping, even Harvest House. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that and how you're handling COVID.
Yeah, so my sister's the executive director of Harvest House, and she has a comprehensive plan in place with not just her staff, but with clients. So they have changed almost every aspect of how they do what they do and have had to do it very quickly. I know pastoring here at the church, we've changed the way we've done church 5 different times in the last 9 months. So imagine having an organization or a business or whatever where you literally restructure the thing 5 times in 9 months. And she's faced the same thing because we have over 400 beds in Sarasota and Manatee County. Last year there was like over 200 children that were not homeless because of what we're doing there. So you're dealing with vulnerable lives and people that don't have maybe the same access to health care as others. And so the risk is even higher. And so she's had to bring in, all of the shields for meeting face-to-face with clients. Then the other thing is a lot of our clientele or the people that we're helping, they don't have access to technology to do a Zoom meeting with their counselor or with their case manager. So they've had to really put a lot of precautions in place. And then on top of the stress of working in the being a social worker, or being a case manager, now we're going to require you to do all of these extra steps, getting paid. We do much better than a lot of other social agencies in the area, but still, that it's a hard job and a hard place to keep your staff motivated and encouraged with all of these extra things. They've done an incredible job so far. With that many people and properties and and lives. We haven't had a single really outbreak of anything, and it's been knock on wood, right? It's been we've been very fortunate.
That's great. That's great. Especially when you're here in Florida, there's the rates are going up. It's nice to see people really taking it seriously.
But the demand for, because we have two programs, we have Home Again and we have the Freedom Program. The Home Again is dealing predominantly with homeless families with children or unaccompanied youth ages 18 to 24 who are at risk, who kind of age out of foster care system, which, by the way, a large portion of them are LGBTQ that we're serving. But on the Freedom Program side, which deals with people that have life-altering, substance abuse issues, of course, the demand is through the roof because of the things you mentioned, the anxiety, the PTSD, all of the different things that seem to be concentrated and exacerbated we have a long waiting list of people that need help. We have a veterans program. We have lots of stuff happening, but it's heartbreaking to see what people are enduring and going through, especially people that came into this with kind of a predisposed problem or issue. It's been very difficult to navigate that with people, but they're doing it, and it's been a great resource, and the community has been tremendous in helping us, especially with those that are out of work and aren't able to contribute to what's going on.
I know as a pastor and as a therapist, you minister to people quite frequently, both of you, in very different ways. What are some big challenges for your parishioners as a pastor and for you as a therapist? Heather?
Oh, gosh. Well, some of the challenges we just talked about with going home and deciding, if they're going to go home, how they're going to navigate. I think, too, just again, that isolation piece is so huge. And when you're LGBTQ, oftentimes your family is your family of choice. For various reasons, we can't come home. We don't have family, who love and honor us. So we make these tight bonds with our friends that become our family, and not having them, because of COVID, not being able to, hug them and be around them it's awful. It's just really, really awful. And so I think, I just try and help them get as connected as possible in this new normal, with regard to, making sure that they're connected to groups or, Zoom chats with their friends, but also just, getting outside of yourself is a great way to help yourself. When you're feeling bad about yourself, doing something for someone else is such a wonderful thing. Volunteering, just doing something that gets you out of your funk,
sure.
And or getting creative is a great way to, finding a new hobby or something to do that, feeds your soul, is really important, because we're in this for a reason, I believe. I really believe that this is happening for a reason. And I think there's a lot of spiritual development that's happening because of it. And even though it comes at a high price, it's like anything with grief. There's gold in the grief. When you get out of it, there's this nugget of gift that you didn't know you had when you started. And so it's a beautiful thing on the other side,
Yeah, I think about that a lot, especially the spiritual development. I mean, Pastor, what do you see in your parishioners? I mean, probably so much.
Matthew, where do we want to start with this? You don't just have the pandemic going on, you have this crazy political environment. And I'm just gonna go there, if that's all right, for a moment. Is it okay if I go there?
It's brunch. We don't have mimosas, but it's brunch.
Yeah, well, I will be filing a complaint against you guys for that. But, the church has been hijacked. In the middle of this, the church has been hijacked in such a way I have never seen in my entire life in the political arena. And I don't care who votes for who, ultimately, but there's been such a division in the midst of a time where we're the least connected. Then on top of it, we have this piece of the puzzle, especially, I know it's everywhere, but it seems to be really concentrated in the church, of great division, where I have people that have decided not to worship with us anymore because I wouldn't come out and simply endorse a specific candidate.
Wow.
Which of course you can't do anyways as a nonprofit.
Right.
Or a 501c3. Or I wouldn't make it plain who I was voting for. They thought, and then it becomes, it becomes the same people that I'm sorry, I'm just going to go there.
I know, the chair's about to spin around completely.
The chair's going to spin. The same people that don't want to wear a mask are the same people that are calling people that vote a certain way murderers.
Right. So both sides, it's always that way.
It doesn't line up with the tenets of the idea of who we follow, which are the teachings of Jesus. It doesn't line up with a man who was on the side of the line with the one that was having the stones thrown at her, or the one who met with the woman at the well when the disciples came, he came back to the disciples and they said, "Why are you talking to that lady?" Those people. And religion, bad religion, will always be on the side of what who you should be around, and it will always divide. And actually the word for the enemy or the accuser, the voice of the accuser in the Greek is kategoros, which literally means to categorize and to divide and to put people in little boxes. And when we can do that, we can control them. And religion has become about control. And when the political environment realizes that we have a lock on controlling people and they can control us, we have a really, really tough situation for parishioners who are just trying to live and survive.
Yeah.
And they're being swept in with a tide. And I'm up here without being political trying to say, guys, this is not healthy and good for any of us.
Yeah.
We need to survive this in a way where we realize no matter if somebody's LGBTQ and you don't agree with that or whatever, which is insane to me, but whatever, or they vote differently, or they mask or don't mask, or they this or that. At the end of the day, we have to figure out how to be one and to unify. And you can't read the teachings of Jesus and think that those people being, saying those people or pushing people aside is at all in line with him.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting is we broke a couple of brunch rules today because we talked about religion and politics and gender identity, which can always bring out the best in people. But I want to ask one question. Aside from heavy drinking, what can we do this holiday season to help manage stress? We need to make this quick. I'm going to go with the pastor first. What do you think we can do to manage this stress that we have right now?
I think first of all, it's beautiful outdoors. So for me, it's been about getting outdoors and maybe finding the one person or two people that that you have that trust with to be with and to talk and to be around. And outdoors seems to be a safer environment to do it. I also feel like as much negative pressure there is on people, and I will make this quick, I promise, to as much negative pressure, it's also a really great opportunity to remind ourselves that this world really does need love, and love looks like something. And what I've been telling my people lately is, if you have to put on a list the top 5 people you love, would your name be on it? And it's a great opportunity to look ourselves in the mirror and discover what's lovable about us and why we're lovely.
I like that. Heather, what about you?
Well, to dovetail with that, if I had to distill it into one, there's lots of things I think you can do, but self-compassion is probably my number one, because self-compassion breeds compassion for others. And that is sometimes a long journey to find that. But there's lots of ways you can do it. You can certainly seek therapy. You can certainly, get more into your spiritual practice if you have one or develop one. You can do some meditation. There's lovely guided meditations. There's lots of things going on right now just to ground you, because everybody's walking around in their heads and not in their bodies a lot of the time. There's so many things we can do, but yeah, self-compassion, forgiveness for self so that you can forgive others. Really doing that internal search is important, and then just allowing yourself to feel your feelings right now. Laugh when you need, when you want to laugh. Cry when you need to cry. We're humans. We're emotional beings. We're not robots with emotions. It's the other way around. We're actually supposed to have all of our emotions, and they're beautiful and healthy. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. It's so great to talk with both of you. I feel really ministered to today, and I need it. If there's anything I need, it's to meet with a pastor and a therapist. I think I need that most of everything. I want to thank you both for your knowledge and for giving us some tools to get through this season. We're going to shift gears in the next segment and some news about one of Sarasota's favorite restaurants. We'll be right back. What would brunch be without a glass of bubbles? Brian Kraft is standing by at Sage with a special guest who's going to create a new signature cocktail and some news from Sage. Brian, are you there?
Thank you, Matthew. And we are here at Sarasota Staple, Sage, and we have our friend David here with us to tell us about an exciting brunch that they're about to roll out. And David, can you tell us a little bit about some of the signature cocktails?
Be happy to. Today we're going to focus on one of our drinks that we're super excited about. It's a Bellini, which originally was an Italian drink made from peach nectar and Italian sparkling wine, Prosecco. We're going to do a little bit of elevation in making the puree fresh in house. All right, so first we're going to use some of our homemade peach nectar that we have right here. It's been chilled. We're going to pour it in our glass very gently like so. Now this nectar is really great. It's going to create such a delicious mouthfeel to the drink. Then everyone's favorite, the sparkling wine. Right here we have a really nice Italian Prosecco, and we just simply add it on top. Now it'll create a really big fizziness, but this is kind of what we want in order to get it really incorporated. So every time you sip it, you get a really delicious flavor. Got to be a little careful, make sure it doesn't spill. And then our amazing spheres right here, made with homemade grenadine and raspberry liqueur, right into the drink. And a quick once over to make sure everything's delicious. And very simply, you have it right there, Sage Bellini.
So David, I'm really excited when I found out that you guys are doing brunch. So can you tell me a little bit more about why you decided to do brunch and what Sage's spin on brunch is going to be?
Sure. Well, I can speak for my owner, Sharon Carroll, in that one of the main focuses of her in opening this place was to develop a sense of community and also have it in such this beautiful setting. So in order to grow and build on that sort of idea, we decided to start doing brunch. I think it's the sort of brunch that it hasn't been seen in Sarasota before. We're really planning to knock people's socks off with the sort of different styles of egg cookery that we'll be having, delicious omelets, still building on our global cuisine, but also using international and global drinks that pair with those sorts of flavors and complement that idea instead of contrasting.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about this new innovative idea you've got here with for the friends at home?
Sure. So these are something that me and my team are really, really excited about. These are to-go cocktails that we've taken a lot of time researching and developing to make sure that we can give everyone at home the same sort of experience that they've come to love and expect from Sage. So one of the cool things that we do that makes our to-go drinks a little different is one, they come in these really amazing bottles here, but another Sage touch, as I like to say, we are clarifying all of our citrus juices that we use in our to-go drinks. And what I mean by that is that we're taking it and putting it through a machine called a centrifuge, which is going to make it crystal clear like water. So that's how we get the name Clarita, which is our take on a margarita, but is virtually clear.
Thank you so much, David. That was such an amazing insight into what Sage is going to be offering us for brunch. And Matthew, although you don't have this at the studio, I'm going to go enjoy my Sage Bellini.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And Brian will be back at the end of the show live with Spin to Win. Stick with us for that. I want to take a moment to again thank the Sarasota Community Foundation and the Harvest Church and Harvest House for their generous support of this new program. Harvest Church opened its doors to us so we could record our show here, and the Community Foundation provided us with a grant to help get us up and running. I'd also like to thank Opix Media for their production and editing facilities. That just about does it for this episode of The Brunch Show. We'll be back in January with another episode. If you have comments or suggestions, keep them to yourself. No, I'm kidding. You can write to us at thebrunchshowsrq@gmail.com. Right now, it's Spin to Win Live with Brian Kraft.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to our inaugural episode of The Brunch Show. I'm Brian with Project PRIDE SRQ, and I just wanted to bring your attention to some exciting things we have going on. So we are currently doing a spin to win, which is really exciting. We are featuring a local artist, Karen Chandler. She's amazing. Her pieces are all throughout Sarasota. She's got amazing installation pieces, and one of her most famous is the Sarasota Heroes, which are actually up for a spin right now. So what you do is you buy a spot, and then we spin the wheel, and then luck has it, we pick a lucky winner, and they're able to win these amazing signed framed prints from Karen herself. Karen also is featured at the Bazaar in Apricot and Lime, so you can always check out her work and go support local businesses through that. But as Project PRIDE SRQ, we are so excited to be facilitating this new program that has really no end in what it can do. We are really excited to be facilitating new relationships in the community and making everyone feel connected and engaged. And it's really important to us. It's part of our mission to support, unite, and really just bring up everybody in the community, bring visibility to our community. And through this program, I feel like we can definitely achieve our goals. And this is just a really great platform to bring our community together and spotlight some of the amazing things that are going on. So with that being said, thank you for tuning in to our first inaugural episode, and we hope that you stay with us, and we'll see you next month.